Candidate Hillary Clinton, meanwhile, has her own plan to dig out of the mortgage mess that goes $5 billion further than the president's. I spoke to Senator Clinton about the economy, the presidential race, and subprime.
I think it's agreed upon that we need to have a freeze or a timeout on foreclosures while we try to figure out how we can work out the conditions for people who are in owner-occupied homes. We have to freeze the adjustable rate mortgages and try to figure out how we can buy some breathing room for up to 5 years at least. And we need to have more transparency in the market. In addition, some of the servicers have told me that they're frankly worried about participating because they're worried about legal liability to their ultimate investor who holds the paper. So we need to look at how we get them to the table but also provide them some protection. I also would like to see a $5 billion fund to help communities come up with ways of keeping people in homes, because otherwise you'll have a cascade of people being foreclosed upon, neighborhoods turning to blight, increasing crime.
Where does that $5 billion come from?
Well, it's going to come from where it comes from, the budget. It's going to come from emergency spending. I view this as part of the stimulus that I think is going to be required over the next year to 2 or 3 years. I don't see this as a bailout. If it were, then once again we'd see the banks being bailed out. We'd see the lenders not being held responsible. There is enough responsibility and, dare I say, blame to go around here. The regulators, they're not being held accountable. So why all of a sudden do we get really harsh on some homeowner who wanted to have part of the American dream, did everything he or she thought they were supposed to do, but did get in over their head because of unscrupulous lending practices, because of fraudulent claims by the people who are supposed to be assisting them?
Senator, with all due respect, where was Congress during all of this? We had a lot of non-banks coming on the scene with all of these crazy proposals, no documentation, no interest for several months. Did Congress understand what was going on?
No, and under the Republican Congress, they didn't want to understand. You know, the ostrich head was in the sand. You didn't have an administration who paid attention to the early warning signals. You didn't have a Congress that cared about it.
You're talking about letting the Bush tax cuts expire. I spoke with Martin Feldstein, who of course was a contender to be the chairman of the Federal Reserve. He said that's essentially a tax increase, and that's always, as typically happens, is it's going to pressure people who are already pressured. How do you justify this situation when you've got people under pressure and just the thought that they're going to be paying more taxes, they may pull in their
Well, since my husband and I are in that bracket, I don't feel pressured. And I know that a lot of the people who are among the wealthiest 1 to 10% of our country who have benefited extremely from the Bush tax cuts don't feel the pressure that the average middle-class family feels. We're going to do stimulus for the vast majority of Americans, and part of the way we're going to pay for it is by letting those tax cuts on the wealthiest of Americans expire. Now, we have to look at every set of conditions. I don't know what is going to be happening in the economy in January 2009. Up until then, we have a very different philosophy and attitude in this administration, and lots of people who come on your show who, you know, are gung-ho, protect the tax cuts for the wealthiest of Americans. That will not work if the economy slows down. You need to get money in the pockets of tens of hundreds of millions of Americans, and that's what I intend to do.
You know what, Senator, it's not just the rich who own stocks. We've got 100 million people in this country.
I'm not saying anything about stocks. I'm saying
capital gains tax goes away.
Well, you know,
how does that impact the economy?
Well, the capital gains tax, I'm talking about the upper income tax credit, tax brackets. You know, capital gains, I think we may have to nudge a little bit, but depending again on the conditions. I am going to look at the economy as it is. But I think it is, as I probably evidenced to your viewers, amusing that we would have had these tax cuts, which I have benefited from, and people in my income tax bracket have benefited from, and the rest of the economy is stalled, and many people are seeing no real increase in their wages.
The EU apparently upset with some comments that you made. You want to rethink what the Bush administration has done with regard to trade. Hasn't the export situation been incredibly helpful to economic growth in this country?
Well, I want to get to a balanced position with respect to trade. I want us to be exporting. Obviously, I favor that. But I am concerned about the continuing decline in the dollar.
My thanks to Senator Clinton. Meanwhile, one